Imagine being 9 years old and watching your entire family disappear. Your mother, sister, brother, grandma, everyone who kept you safe being taken away. And then for months, you're completely alone. 400 years later, history remembers Jennet Device as the girl who condemned her own family to death during the Pendle Witch Trials. But what if Jennet wasn't a villain? What if she was another victim? In August of 1612, 10 people were executed for witchcraft following witch trials in Lancashire. Amongst the accused were members of Jennet Device's own family. Her mother, Elizabeth Device, her brother James, and her sister Alison. But Jennet herself was never accused. Instead, she became the prosecution's star witness. A 9-year-old child standing in a courtroom full of powerful men. According to the records, she gave evidence against her own family. For centuries, that image has followed her. The little girl who betrayed her mother. But I think the story may be far more complicated than that. To understand Jennet Device, we first have to understand the world she was born into. Pendle in the early 1600s was not a forgiving place. The Device family lived in extreme poverty. Begging was common, hunger was common, survival itself was uncertain. This was not the world of fairy tales, pointed hats and dementors that people often associate with witches today. This was a brutal world of illness, fear, superstition and desperation. And when accusations of witchcraft began spreading through Pendle in 1612, everything around Jennet collapsed incredibly quickly. Her sister Alison was accused of cursing an old peddler named John Law after an argument. The accusation reached Roger Nowell, His Majesty's Justice of Peace for the area, and from there the situation escalated rapidly. Arrests followed, examinations followed, confessions followed, and all the members of Jennet's own family were taken away to Lancaster Castle to await trial. But here's the question I keep coming back to. What happened to Jennet Device during those 4 months between the arrests and the trials? Because unlike the others, Jennet remained free, a 9-year-old child alone. There are no surviving records that clearly explain where Jennet stayed during that time. And that absence is important, because if her immediate family had been imprisoned, who was caring for her? Who was feeding her? Who was protecting her? In the official account written by Thomas Potts, Jennet appears at the trials composed, articulate, and capable of giving detailed testimony. But when we look closer at some of her statements, something becomes interesting. Not all of Jennet's evidence came from things she personally witnessed. For example, she claimed her brother James had a familiar spirit named Dandy, but much of the language surrounding familiars throughout the Pendle examinations follow recurring themes: black dogs, spirits, the devil appearing in animal forms, strange supernatural encounters. Themes which strongly mirrored beliefs circulating at the time, particularly those promoted by King James I. Just a few years earlier, James had published a book called Demonology, discussing witchcraft, demons and familiars. And what's striking is how closely many of the Pendle confessions resemble the fears and imagery described within it, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. Were these poor and uneducated families independently describing identical supernatural experiences? Or were the examinations themselves being shaped by the expectations of the authorities? I want to be very careful here. I cannot prove that Jennet Device was coached. Nobody can. But personally, I struggle to believe that a 9-year-old child living in extreme poverty suddenly became the central witness in one of England's most famous witch trials without significant influence from the adults around her. And if Jennet was taken into the care of people connected to the investigations, what would that have looked like to a frightened child? For the first time in her life, perhaps she had regular meals, warmth, protection, safety. After all, survival in Pendle was difficult even with family around you. Without them, it would have been almost impossible. And if the powerful adults protecting her encouraged certain narratives, encouraged her to repeat certain stories, why would a terrified child resist them? Especially if she had also been convinced her family truly were dangerous. Because we have to remember, Jennet was growing up in a world where people genuinely feared witchcraft. A world where the devil was considered real. A world where adults in positions of powers believed witches walked amongst ordinary people. And then came the courtroom. The moment history remembers most clearly. According to Thomas Potts, Elizabeth Device reacted so emotionally upon seeing Jennet that she had to be removed from the courtroom before Jennet could continue speaking. And honestly, can we really be surprised by that reaction? Imagine Elizabeth's situation. After 4 months imprisoned in horrific conditions, her mother dead, her other children beside her awaiting trial, her body lightly weakened, her future almost certainly hopeless. And then she sees the one child left outside prison standing in court for the prosecution. But I also think that we should consider Jennet in that moment. This was likely the first time she had seen her family since the arrests, and they wouldn't have looked the same. We know James Device was described as so weak he could barely stand at the bar. These prisoners were not being treated kindly. So what did Jennet see? Did she see monsters? Did she see witches? Or did she simply see her broken family? Personally, I think fear played a huge role in that courtroom moment. Not hatred, not evil, fear. And perhaps that's why Jennet still unsettles people 400 years later. Because she forces us to ask impossible questions. How much responsibility can we place upon a child? At what point does survival become manipulation? And how many of the stories we inherit from history are shaped not by truth, but by power? Because the reality is, we only possess one major surviving account of these trials. The account written by Thomas Potts. A man who openly admired the court, praised the judges, and sought endorsement from influential figures connected to the crown. That does not automatically make the account false, but it does mean we should read it critically, especially when the consequences were death. History remembers Jennet Device as the girl who condemned her family. But I think history may have judged her too simply. I don't believe Jennet was a villain. I don't even believe she understood the full weight of what was happening around her. I believe she was a frightened child, living in a terrifying world, surrounded by powerful adults, religious fear, political pressure, and unimaginable trauma. A child trying to survive. And perhaps the greatest tragedy of all is that whilst her family were executed as witches, Jennet Device lost her family too. So if Jennet walked into this room today, I wouldn't ask her anything. I'd simply give her a hug.